Hey everyone, Srini Rao here from NotionEssentials.com. And today what I want to talk about is how to create and use templates in Notion. So why do we use templates? Well, they help us to save time, they help us to get more done, and to focus on the things that actually matter to us. So most of us spend a lot of time doing repetitive work in our day-to-day workflow. And anytime you do something more than once in a day, a week, a month, or a year, you can actually streamline that process by using templates. And usually templates are something where the process and the output are pretty much exactly the same every time. Obviously, things in a blog post or a podcast, the content is going to be different, but the process and the ultimate product is pretty much the same. You can use these for reports as well. Warren Buffett once said to build a company that idiots can run because eventually they will. And in a lot of ways, that's a really good metaphor for thinking about how to create templates. Now, we can do simple templates, that have just one block. We can do checklists, we can do trackers, or you can do really complex templates that have multiple blocks. For example, different tables, different pages, things that you have to collaborate on, databases, that kind of stuff. So let's actually go into a few different examples of how to create templates. So one of the easiest ones to do is a blog post. Now, typically when you do a blog post, you have something that looks a bit like this, right? You have a sort of checklist of the things you want to complete. There's an introduction, all that kind of stuff, right? So rather than going through the headache of dealing with, setting all that up every single time, we can actually do that just by creating a template. And we basically use the template block and create a template button. And what you do is you give it a name. And you say, okay, this is my new blog post template. And what I recommend you do is for any template to create a page where all of the blocks inside of the template are like this. So because if you don't do that, what will happen is the new blog post template will just litter the existing page and it'll get kind of confusing. So all we have to do is move this into here. Let's get rid of this. When we close it, and now we have a new blog post template. So I'm going to move this over to creating a template. And we'll actually go put this back into our video there, but you can move it around. So you see this new blog post template. Now, if we use it and we just press new blog post, it'll take us to that page right there. And you'll see here that it doesn't clutter the existing page that we're on. So that's a really simple blog post template. We can do the same thing for something like podcast episodes. Again, you're going to see here sort of a simple structure. Now, if this is the basic template for a podcast, and I've made this really, really simple just for the sake of this example, again, what we can do is we can create a page called New Podcast Episode. And then what we can do is we can actually take all of the content that's here and put this into New Podcast Episode. Now, we just repeat the same process that we did for the blog post template using the template button and give it the name New Podcast Episode. Get rid of our to-do, which is there by default usually when you create a template. And then what you do is you just drop this in there and voila. Now you have a New Podcast Episode template. And you can use these inside of editorial calendars, that kind of stuff. And you can make these templates as complex or as simple as you want. These are really simple examples that I'm using here just to kind of demonstrate how the template process works. Now, projects and templates with multiple pages and blocks tend to be a bit more complex. So one of the methodologies I use to organize information is called building a second brain. So you can see here that unlike a template where we only have the blog post or whatever, we basically can take every one of these and we would turn them into a separate page. So for example, you can say, okay, cool, turn into page. Now we go to projects, we give it an icon, do the same thing here, and that way you have sort of a more complex structure for templates. But let's say that you want to have multiple second brains. So give me just a sec here. I'm actually pressing the wrong thing. So all right, so we're going to turn this also into a page. All right, and we'll do the same thing here. Okay, and we'll do the same thing here. Now, archives is the only place that I don't tend to do a lot of organization. It's just kind of a place where everything lives. Think of it as sort of the garbage of your Notion. So let's actually see if we can find a garbage icon. Okay. All right, so there we go. We got a little box of stuff that doesn't matter anymore. Resources can be anything you want. Areas of responsibility is basically something that you work on a daily basis. So one of the things that I've talked about in previous videos is, how do you manage projects? So we can actually do a template again for that based on Scott Belsky's framework called the action method, where we can say, okay, this is my action, action steps. Reference materials, again, we can just do that thing where we turn it into pages. And we can do back burner items, things that aren't relevant or that you're not going to take action on right at the moment. And the thing that's nice about this is, let's say that inside of our action steps, we just use a simple table that basically has everything we want. We have reference materials. And again, you can do this however you want, just because of the fact that you have so much structure here in terms of what you can do. We give it an icon, and then we can do the same thing with back burner items. Now, the cool thing is that every time you do a new project, rather than having to do all of this from scratch, you can actually create a very simple project template. And the way to do that is exactly what we talked about. Now, again, one of the things you want to make sure is that you put all of this into a new project page. Otherwise, every time you create a new project, it's going to litter the existing page you're on with all this stuff. So let's just create a page called New Project. And then we'll go and we'll move all of the items from our projects template or project section here into New Project. Oops, I don't want to do that. There we go. Let's give this an icon just for making it simple to organize. Now, what we can do is we can take all of this and we can put it inside of the new project page, and we can even give it this an icon as well. Now, the cool thing is, every time we want to create a new project, rather than going through all the steps that I just did, all you have to do is go ahead and put new project template or new project. Again, we get rid of this to-do concept or to-do item block, and then we just drop this in there. And make sure you get that in there that way. Close it, and now anytime you have a new project, you can just create a template for it. See, and basically your projects page stays really clean, but then you go to the page itself, and as you see here, it automatically takes you there. So that's how you create a very simple project template, and that lives within inside of building a second brain. And you can even create a template for the second brain. So we could take all of this and do the same thing I just did for projects. So let's do one more example. A couple months ago, I came across this investor update for founders. It was just a basic fill-in-the-blank investor update. Now, if you're running a startup or you're the founder of a company who has investors, these are things you're going to have to do pretty regularly. You're going to probably want to do this, maybe once a quarter or once a month. Now, rather than having to go and write all of this from scratch, what we could do is we could take all of this the same way we've just done with everything else, and you can basically clean this up and get rid of some of the stuff that's in here. You can add, metrics graphs. We can use embeds. It's really up to you, again, how you want to customize this or what's important to you. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to take this email here, and I'm just going to put it into a template, and we're going to call it Investor Update. So again, like I said, you want to make sure that you create a page for this thing just so that it doesn't end up cluttering the existing space that you're on. So we'll call that the Investor Update template page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this content and we're going to move it into here. Now you can cut and paste, or you can just drag and drop. Cool. So now we have an Investor Update template page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a template, again, with a template button. And we'll call this Investor Update. And then we'll move this here. So chances are, you come across frameworks and formulas and all sorts of things across on the web every single day where you think it's really cool. You're like, oh, that's a nice 4-step thing that I could use. And you basically could just create a Notion template for it. So that way you're able to use that process. You can use this to do sales pages. If you're a copywriter, you can use this to do spreadsheets. It doesn't really matter. And then finally, there's one other really cool thing in Notion. They actually have a lot of pre-built templates. And so you can see here that if you wanted to, you could have a habit tracker template that's already built. And you can customize this whole thing based on whatever it is that you want to do. So in this case, they've gone clearly kind of insane and said, we're going to have all these habits, but you could do this for just one habit. And you'll see here, Notion has an existing template gallery of all sorts of cool stuff. They also have one on their website that their own users have created. So this is the basics of how you create templates in Notion. And If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer. And let me know if you do. I look forward to hearing from you. If you need help custom designing your Notion workspace, visit notionessentials.com and get a free custom workspace audit.